Hello, I'm Bernard Keevy. I'd like to show you how you could add up to 6% or more to your bottom line profit. So it all starts with understanding your numbers. So here we have our volume is 3,000 units of whatever it is we sell. We charge 100 for this thing or service. So our revenue would be 300,000. Our cost of goods sold, that's basically the cost of supplying what it is we're selling. So if it's goods, it might be things like materials and labour components built in. If it was services, it might be things like, I don't know, room hire costs. It's the things that you'd pay for by supplying these things that you wouldn't have to pay for if you weren't supplying them. The difference between the price and the cost of goods sold, or the revenue and the cost of goods sold, is your gross profit margin, which in this case would be 40%. Therefore, your gross profit is 40% of your revenue, which is 120,000. But you'll also have some other overheads, things like rent, rates, depreciation, wages and salaries, etc. And that will take us to our bottom line net profit of 60,000. Now, what I want to look at is the effect of making some 5% improvements in some of these numbers. So start by saying we could increase our volume by 5%. So basically, we're going to sell 5% more things or services. Our price doesn't change. Our revenue now goes up from 300,000 to 315,000 because our volume's 3150. Our cost of goods sold will also go up because we're selling more things, so that goes up by 5% to 189,000. Our gross margin doesn't change because we're not altering our price or our direct cost. But our gross profit goes up to 126,000. Overheads stay the same because they're fixed. The effect is our net profit actually goes up by 266,000, which is a 10% increase. So selling more volume, 5% more volume, means we'd increase our net profit bottom line by 10%, which is very good. Let's now look at the effect of putting our price up by 5%. Again, doesn't mean we necessarily have to put our headline price up. There's lots of ways of increasing our average price by 5% without increasing our headline price. So our average price goes up to 105. Our revenue goes up to 315,000 again, because 3,000 times 105. Our cost of goods sold doesn't change now because we're not selling more volume. But our gross margin goes up because the difference between our selling price and our direct cost is higher. So it's now 43% gross margin, which means our gross profit goes up to 135,000 from 120,000. Our overheads don't change again because we're not changing, well, basically our overheads don't change. So our net profit now goes from 60,000 to 75,000. Now that is a 25% increase, which is, hugely better than the previous one. If we could reduce our cost of goods sold by 5%, again in isolation, then volume and price stay the same. Our revenue stays the same at 300,000. But we've now reduced our cost of goods sold by 5% to 171,000. Again, our gross profit margin goes up to 43%. But our gross profit now goes from 120,000 to 129,000. Our overheads don't change. And now our net profit goes from 60,000 to 69,000, which is a 15% increase, which is not as good as when we put our prices up by 5%. And then the final one to look at is reducing our overheads by 5%. So nothing changes in terms of volume, price, revenue, cost of goods sold, gross profit margin, gross profit. Our overheads go from 60,000 to 57,000, which means our net profit goes from 60,000 to 63,000, which is a 5% increase. So let's just summarise the overall effect. If we were to make 5% improvements in all those areas together, so the volume, the price, the cost of goods sold and the overheads, the overall effect, if you crunch the numbers through, would be to take our net profit from 60,000 to 102,750. So really, ideally, what we want to be making is small improvements in all those numbers. So to summarise those figures, if you cut your overheads by 5%, it adds 5% to your bottom line, and cutting your overheads is never easy, particularly in the present climate. If you could sell 5% more volume, that will add 10% to your bottom line. Selling more volume, there are various strategies you could follow to do that. That's very doable for most businesses. Increasing your average revenue, your average price, by 5% will add a whopping 25% to your bottom line for most businesses. There are several ways of doing that. One of them, of course, is to make sure that you stand out from your so-called competition, but there are other strategies as well that you can follow. And if you reduce your cost of goods sold, your direct costs by 5%, again, which is not as easy to do, you will add 15% to your bottom line. So the most achievable for most businesses there are to increase your volume and price, and they have the biggest impact. Reducing your costs, well, the cost of goods sold, okay, that does have an impact, but that's not easy to do, nor is reducing your overheads. So really, in an ideal world, you want to make 5% or 10% or more improvements in all those areas. But the easiest ones to focus on are your price and your volume. Hope you found that useful.